Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's Poly Weekly News for October 24th. I keep forgetting the date. I have to look at the calendar all the time. I'm your host, David Danto, and I've got my co-host back with me again. Katie is here like she was last week. Say hi to everybody, Katie.
Hello, everyone. Katie Atwell here from the Analyst Relations team. Good to
So,
see you.
Katie, we've got a couple of guests on from one of our analyst firms that we do work with a lot and that we trust. Why don't you introduce them to the show?
Yeah, thank you so much. Joining us today, we have Beth Schultz and Erwin Lazar from Metrigy. Really excited to have them join us. Thank you for your time. Beth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am the Vice President of Research and Principal Analyst at Metrigy, responsible for areas like employee experience and customer communications platform as a service.
Great to have you. Erwin?
Yeah, hi. Glad to be back again. I'm Erwin Lazar, President and Principal Analyst at Metrigy, and I lead our coverage around unified communications and collaboration.
I'd love to talk about some research today, both that's out and research that's coming. But let's first talk about what's out. Beth, I think you just released some research.
Yes, I did, Katie. Earlier this quarter was our first kind of our foray into employee experience and workforce engagement. We surveyed 250 companies globally and found out a few interesting things, some of which was around the use of collaboration gear, kind of the thought around collaboration gear for improving the employee experience. I found, for example, that 72.2% of the folks that we surveyed are looking at their webcams and their video meeting equipment as important to the collaboration experience, the employee experience rather. A desktop video device is also important for 50% of the people, and nearly 50% of the people also see professional grade headsets as being important to the employee experience.
Erwin, I also think you have some research that just came out around economic impact. Are companies pulling out, spending more? What's going on from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, in September, we published a study of 400 companies with data gathered in late August. And it was not just my area of unified communications collaboration, but Beth's area of employee experience, as well as our colleague Robin Garris's area of customer engagement, customer experience. So our goal was to understand what's happening with respect to IT spending as companies are facing potentially a global recession, obviously a tough economic climate in many parts of the world. And surprisingly, I think we found that companies were still viewing IT largely as an investment area. Digging more deeply into the unified communications collaboration space, we found about 25% of companies that were increasing their investment in collaboration technologies this year, with the majority staying flat. But moving into next year, about 51% said that they would be increasing their investment in collaboration technologies, largely focusing on video as they continue to try and figure out, how do I best support hybrid work? How do I best support a mixed workforce where some people are full-time at home, some are full-time in the office, and a large percentage are having that flexibility to spend a couple of days here and there when they feel they need to come into the office. So room video systems, video conferencing applications, video management, as well as security were really the big areas that we saw the companies were saying, you know what, given the economic climate, I need to be able to support the ability for people to work wherever they are and potentially reduce things like real estate costs. And still, even in the challenging economy, we see large demand for employees. So going back to some of what Beth just covered, focusing on how do I improve employee experience so that I don't have to worry about turnover and I can attract qualified applicants is still a critical area that companies are looking at, even in light of a overall challenging macroeconomic environment.
So, Beth, it's interesting from an employee experience perspective, what's going on as we look at, coming out of the pandemic and seeing what's going on. So it's a period in time that I'm going to start calling culture wars, because, you have knowledge workers that have experienced the autonomy of remote and hybrid working, being wherever they want to be, at a client, in an office for a group, or at home when they don't feel like they need that commute on any given day. And you have a number of employers that are trying to mandate employees back in the office. And it's really going to take a while, I guess, to shake all of that out. What have you been hearing casually or in your research about, the employee experience of what working, for a large company is going to be like, or a medium-sized company going forward.
Well, I think it's anybody's guess at this point, right, David? I mean, there is that struggle that we're seeing companies trying to bring employees back, but maybe they're not saying exactly why they need to be there or giving them a really good reason to be there. I mean, our research shows that there very much is a lost sense of community when you're working at home. There's this disconnectedness. I think about a third of folks had told us that that's a big issue for them, and that is a huge issue going forward. You can't have that sense of community. You're going to lose people. People want to feel connected. And there's all sorts of employee experience technology that can help solve that problem, as well as different corporate policies and practices. And it goes well beyond having your M&Ms in your snack room, right? You really have to have motivate people to come back into the office. And we do know that companies are revising their employee experience strategies around this whole issue of trying to figure it all out. So.
Yeah, and Erwin, I guess a lot of that depends on whether the office has been updated as opposed to the way it was, when the pandemic hit and we all went home. I don't think anybody's returning to the offices the way they were. I think technology is changing, layouts are changing, experience is changing. I assume your research showed some of that, or your next research will, in terms of the early data coming back.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the company. We published data in fall of 21 when we thought, we were getting out of the pandemic before Omicron hit. We found still the majority of companies were envisioning a return to the way things were, that, they weren't making the investments in changing their office layouts. What we found more recently is that companies are looking at, okay, the office is now more of a meeting place than an individual workplace. So I'm going to a focus of, say 70% of that space is for meetings, 30% of that space is for individual work. The individual work space is hot desking versus people having that traditional office environment. So I think that's what most companies are starting to think about. And again, to your question and Beth's comments about, what makes sense. What our research has shown is that giving employees the choice of where they work tends to correlate with more successful companies. I've been following some of the research that's come out over the last year from Slack's Future Forum, where they go out directly at end users, and what they found is that people want that ability to choose where they work. They don't want to be forced to work from home. They don't want to be forced back in the office. They want to say, what, maybe I do want to go in the office a couple of days a week. Maybe I do feel like I still need some of that human connection, but I also want to be able to do it when it works for me. And so I think that's what the successful organizations are going to build toward, that model of equipping offices for the people who come in when they feel that it's worth their time to come in versus forcing everybody back in.
Do we have an idea how long we'll be living in this world?
I mean, I would think we've shown that remote work works, and we've shown that people are more productive, more happier, less stressed, I think, if they have that flexibility to work where they want to, when they want to, and even have time flexibility. So, if I'm a young parent and I need time in the mornings to take my kids to school or afternoon activities or so on, that I have that flexibility to set the hours that work for me, and I can start working more asynchronously. And we're starting to see a lot of investment in asynchronous technologies that allow me to record a video, that allow me to check into a workspace and add my comments at different times of the day, where maybe I don't need to have as many meetings and synchronous type collaboration. So, I think we're in a new world. I don't see anything that's ever going to take us back to, hey, everybody has to come back to the office. But I also don't, think that the people are going to be forced to stay at home like they have been in many companies.
Yeah, Beth, how much of this is really just the playing out of people not wanting to be told what to do? I mean, it's silly, it's human nature, but, in looking at the experience of employees and how they look at it, nobody wants to be told you must stay home. Everybody didn't want to be in a lockdown. Nobody wants to be told you must go to the office. People tend to want to do the things they're not allowed to do. And I'm curious if it's really just a case of, we're not really talking about remote working or hybrid working or in-office working, but we're more talking about autonomy.
I would absolutely agree. It is about giving employees the choice, letting them be flexible. I know people that started out their work from home experience saying, I am not going back to the office. I absolutely am never going back to the office. And what do you know? They're back in the office because they're missing that human connection. And there's only so, I mean, there's a lot going into collaboration applications today, to pull sort of data out of those applications and understand how employees are behaving in their virtual work life. But there's still, nothing can be in-person collaboration. I don't think.
This is also interesting. How does this relate to your upcoming research? What are you both working on?
So our next study from my standpoint is our workplace collaboration 2022-23 study. It's a deep dive into what our company's doing with respect to supporting the hybrid workforce that we've talked about. So what technologies are they investing in? How are they dealing with user adoption, with training, with data gathering, with working with lines of business outside, or working with HR and facilities to help with making optimal decisions. So we're digging deeply into video, messaging, calling applications. We're also looking at emerging AI type applications, social collaboration tools that recreate, sort of that physical workplace in a virtual world, virtual whiteboard applications, AR, VR, et cetera. So that research will be out by the end of October, and we're really excited to share it with our clients.
Sure. And Beth, you've also got a report coming out in a few weeks, right?
In the fourth quarter, yes. It's not necessarily related to employee experience, but it is in one of my other topic areas, which is communications platform as a service, or CPaaS. And we're really going to be taking a look. We have done CPaaS related research as part of our existing contact center customer experience, and then UC&C workplace collaboration research. But this will be our first standalone study on CPaaS and how businesses are approaching the use of communications APIs, both on the CX side and on the employee experience side. And I'm sorry, the employee facing side. So we'll be trying to take a look at, are they just buying APIs? Are they buying package solutions to meet different business cases? How is their use changing? Who are they using? How they envision kind of how developers think about CPaaS versus a IT leader or a CX leader. What else will we be taking a look at? All the different types of APIs that are in use, what the pain points are, what the challenges are, what the benefits are, how they're being successful, who's being successful, and how they're being successful.
Do you see organizations copying other successful organizations? There are a lot of people out there trailblazing in the API marketplace right now.
Are you asking from an enterprise standpoint?
Yeah, from an enterprise standpoint.
Certainly the digital natives have been first out there with their use of communications APIs. Seen a lot of kind of followers on that, especially during the pandemic. Everybody had to move kind of quickly into the cloud so they could be more flexible in meeting customer needs and employee needs, for that matter. And so a lot of use cases spun out of the move into the pandemic.
And, that's something that we really don't talk a lot about, and we probably should. Over the almost 3 years of this pandemic, going into it, we didn't have a slam dunk for organizations operating communications in the cloud. We had a lot of people that are still on-prem, a lot of people that are worried about security of shared platforms and things of that nature. And the realization that hit everybody, whether you believe it's whichever pundit talks about 3 years of digital transformation or 5 years of digital transformation, that you've got companies, if you're not in the cloud right now, you are not going to succeed. And I guess that's really just a given at this point. I assume your research shows that.
Oh, absolutely. CPaaS, the use of CPaaS really helps you sort of push wherever you're coming from, right? Because you can use it to build new applications or augment existing applications, or, you can use it to, take existing workflows that are kind of cumbersome and, kind of beef them up using APIs as well. So lots of opportunity there. And I don't think we could be where we are today without the use of CPaaS.
Agreed. And Erwin, I guess in the areas that you're really looking at, you kind of get that same feeling as well, that we are in a place that we never would have been in if the pandemic hadn't happened. The technology changed, the office changed, the way people are looking at things. It really was a revolution in terms of what's happening.
I think both sides. I mean, I don't think the world could have remained productive without the cloud technologies being there in the first place. So, we had technologies like video conferencing as an example that really weren't widely deployed until the pandemic kind of forced people to deploy them, or at least not personal video. Obviously, you had it in conference rooms and so on. I think it not only have the cloud technologies enabled people to continue to work during the pandemic, but you've obviously seen a massive uptake. But we still see, at least in the calling side, there's still a lot of on-prem solutions. There's a lot of customized solutions for different verticals like retail, hospitality, healthcare, and so on. So companies are trying to figure out, how can I continue to maintain that need for very highly customized solutions, but also layer in some advanced technologies that are brought in by AI and so on. And that's where, as Beth mentioned, CPaaS really comes in as a way to almost bridge cloud and on-prem for those companies who still can't find themselves a pathway to the cloud.
Yeah, when I was on the consulting side, it was interesting. When you go from different companies to different organizations to different organizations, it's almost like going into a time tunnel where you're seeing, this is what was popular 2 years ago and 4 years. Certainly when you're traveling across the world as well, different regions are adopting these technologies at different speeds. And I assume you make those kind of adjustments in terms of looking at different regions and understand where adoption is greater and where people are, getting closer to the cutting edge as opposed to staying back from it.
Definitely. And as we've looked at cloud communications, we've seen, it used to be a small business market that's, smaller companies found it easier, but we've seen it move into the larger organizations. We've seen geographic growth, pretty consistent across the world, but certainly, the US tends to be a little bit ahead of some of the other regions in adopting some of the more emerging technologies, or at least North America, I should say. But yes, we recently published a study called Workplace Collaboration Metricast, where we looked at growth rates around cloud communications, and we did dive deeply into how that varies based on different parts of the world.
And it's also interesting, and I'll ask both of you to comment on this, that our expectation of experience has been very skewed by what we went through during the pandemic. Whether we intended it to be that way or not, I attended, oh God, I wouldn't even know the number, thousands, hundreds of thousands of video conferences where we were talking room to room. Maybe we had cameras that switched and moved. Most of the time we didn't. We were looking at the bowling pins down the bowling alley, and it was fine. And now that we've experienced working from home as much as we did and seeing people's faces and facial expressions and smiles and when they're not paying attention, we now expect that experience out of our conference rooms. It's just one example where the balance of expectation has completely shifted.
Yeah, I agree. And you're seeing a lot of investment, companies obviously like Poly and the software vendors, Microsoft, Zoom, et cetera, that are trying to recreate that experience of being able to look at somebody in the eye, even if they're sitting around a conference room table. So we're starting to see interest in that. One of the areas what we continue to research is enterprise willingness to adopt and pay for the solutions, and do they see value in it? Certainly the end users do. And so I think, again, trying to ensure that you have meeting equality or equity, so that no matter where somebody is, they have an equal experience. I think it's going to be a really interesting area to watch over the next year or two, especially as the platforms and AI improves to deliver that kind of experience.
Of course, so you're referring to Poly's industry-leading Director AI feature, people framing, that takes our static cameras, our EPTZ cameras, and lets everybody see the tile. So I just want to make sure that we put a name to that comment that you made there, just in case. Beth, are you seeing any other changes from an employee expectation standpoint that is a result of the culture shifts that we've had over the last couple of years?
Well, I certainly we used to be in a situation where if you were remote, you were the oddball out. Now it's almost like if you are in the conference room itself, you're the odd person out, right? There's just kind of been a shift around that. I do want to kind of just circle back to the point I made earlier about, data being available coming out of the collaboration environment, because that's something that's really been new since the pandemic and kind of spurred on because of the pandemic and the incredible use of video meeting technology, right? And you can get this behavioral insights, and companies can take it and they can get usage insights out of data like the Polygear, and find out what's working, what's not working, and then sort of institute some changes throughout their companies, modeling positive behavior. Here's how here's how you can achieve the greatest level of collaboration or the greatest level of engagement or productivity, while having a workforce that is, not stressed out, whatever it might be. But that's the kind of things that we can get out of the applications and equipment that we couldn't before the pandemic.
So Beth, Irwin talked a little bit about how he anticipated and how the data showed spending trends increasing around collaboration gear and rooms and some of the other technologies in the UC space. Are you seeing a similar trend in terms of employee experience and company investment?
Yeah, so David, our tech spending research shows that spending for employee experience technology is actually going to be pretty flat for 63% of companies, or increasing for about 27% of companies through the end of 2022. But the spending outlook is pretty strong for 2023, with about 53% of companies planning to increase their spending. And that would be by an average increase of about 24%. Factors driving employee experience spending, obviously, as Irwin had mentioned, the hybrid workplace, that needs an employee experience technology investment. Companies see that their spending on employee experience technology helps reduce their operational costs. And then it's an opportunity to invest in for competitive advantage with new hires. So we can expect to see some spending increases in employee experience management platforms. That's like your Microsoft Viva, collaborative goal setting, and your intranet and digital workplaces.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Beth and Irwin. We'd love to tell the audience how to get a hold of you.
Well, thank you, Katie. It was a pleasure being here today. Folks can reach out to me directly at beth.schultz@metrigy.com, or reach out to client services at client-services@metrigy.com, or if you future clients can reach out to us at sales@metrigy.com.
Wonderful. Irwin, how can we find you?
Yeah, same group email addresses that Beth shared. Also, I'm at irwin.lazar@metrigy.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter at @IamLazar, and feel free to connect in any way that works for you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your time today. David, over to you.
Terrific. Thank you all very much for being on the show. And I guess we really do need to mention, right, Beth and Irwin, you guys just had some announcements that that you're growing the organization, right? Metrigy is growing and adding people. You don't have to give the specifics, but being bigger is better, actually, correct? You guys are doing a good thing right now.
We're excited. Obviously, like we talked about earlier, it's a tough economic climate, but we were able to announce in late September that we hired Diane Myers, who's a very well-known industry analyst, who joined us on September 26th, and she'll be leading our coverage into looking at overall market trends within the unified communications, customer engagement, employee experience space. So we're really excited to have her aboard. And then we also in September brought aboard a person by the name of Matt Craig as our first chief data scientist. So Matt actually worked with us previously at our former company, and we spent about 2 years trying to get him to come back. And fortunately, we were able to bring him back aboard, and he'll be looking at essentially, how do we more effectively gather data? How do we more effectively analyze it? And how do we bring additional value to our clients to help them with insights that help them make better decisions?
It's great. It's always great to see a small or medium-sized company adding people because they're building the dream team. It goes completely against the concept that you've had in corporate America for years, stack ranking, where we're your top people and your middle people and your bottom people. I wouldn't want to work for a company that has middle and bottom people. I only want to work for organizations that have A-list across the board. So it's great to see you guys growing. Thank you for joining us. For our people watching, thank you very much for watching Poly Weekly News. As always, we will be here next week. But for now, for all of my colleagues at Poly, thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.